Unpopular opinion. Competition in our friendships is not wrong. Hear me out. Hold on, let me explain myself. The reason I say that is because we're human. We're all human. And fortunately, but unfortunately for some of us, that I hate to break it to you, due to that fact, we're just not all that different from each other. As much as we may want to be, and as special as we feel, and as unique, and as much work as we put into, individualizing ourselves and not following the crowd and being an individual and individuating and reinventing ourselves, that's just a part of being human. All of us can relate to that. Some of us function differently due to certain variations, but those things are also very human too. That's why, it's said that the more we understand ourselves, the more we're able to understand others. And one thing I have come to understand about myself as a human in this human experience is that I have felt every single emotion that every other human has felt. I am not exempt from any of those things, from any experience of a feeling. And that's what I believe competitiveness begins as, a feeling. And I think the key to interrupting this insidious pattern that we have amongst, our friendships as women is removing the shame. I'm not sure about you, but in my experience, and as I listen to other women's experience, where there is that malignant and maladaptive form of competition in friendships, therein lies insecurity. And as a human, which one of us has not felt insecure? Which one of us don't have insecurities? And women are expressing how hard it has been to maintain friendships with other women. Yet at the same time, I'm also hearing and experiencing for myself the need and the desire to just have authentic connections and true sisterhood. I think it's invaluable. It's needed. But a part of undoing that and a part of creating what it is that we want to see begins with ourselves. So I'm not here to villainize and demonize the jealous, insecure, competitive friend. I'm just not. Instead, what I'd like to do, because this is the House of Transformation after all, is I want to talk about how can we transform those connections? How can we transform those dynamics? I want to talk about the role that you play. I want to talk about the power that you have to influence those connections. I'm going to approach this, from a perspective of accountability, a perspective of authenticity, vulnerability, and evolution. And those things all sound great, like they really do. However, if you lived long enough, you've gone through enough things, then those things don't always feel so good. So I say that to say this conversation may not feel the best, but that's okay. Because if it's one thing that I want somebody to take away, is that it is okay to feel uncomfortable. And it's the getting past and getting through, working through the discomfort that creates the magic that we're looking for, that forges and solidifies our connections, not only with ourselves, but with each other. Okay. So typically when I'm hearing and when I've experienced a competitive dynamic within a friendship, the number one reason is typically, say it with me, over men. Oh boy, men. Can't live with them and don't want to live without them. I don't know about you, but I'd rather not. I quite like men. And let's just be honest. There is just nothing like the feeling of being desired and the validation and the attention that comes from our male counterparts. It's just something that they're able to do for us that our girlfriends just can't do for us. And that is okay. That is okay to admit. And that is okay to like those things. But something that I have come to the conclusion of is that where we are headed as a collective, male-centeredness within ourselves will always create tension in our relationships with other women. Because as long as our identity is centered around men and the attention of men, the validation of men, whether we are connected to a man romantically or not, as long as our identity is centered around that, which we have been taught to do from birth, we will always view women through the lens of a maladaptive form of competition. The reality is that in the dating game, we are all each other's competition. Yes, that's the part that we really, really, really have to get clear on. The dating world, the dating market, as people talk about it, relationship, it is competitive because you're weighing your pros and cons. You're comparing and contrasting people and experiences to each other. So the nature of it, yes, is competitive, but that does not mean that we have to engage with this system as it has been designed and as it has come to be through this approach that promotes winning at someone else's expense. And oftentimes when this arises in friendship, one or both people, both ladies, are interested, highly interested in winning the man of their dreams at the expense of their friend. And that is disheartening. That is sad. We don't tend to value the role of a friend as much as we value the role of a romantic partner. I hope that with more conversations like these and being more open and being more honest and authentic and vulnerable with each other, that we can understand collectively that both roles are equally as important. Both roles should be equally valued. In no way would I encourage to neglect a man, you're a man, in order to be good to your girlfriend. No, what I'm saying is be good to them both. Value both. Because the reality is that we get something from both that the other just cannot give us. One yields us one of the most intimate mirrors that we could possibly ever sign up for, which is romantic partnership. Bloodlines are created from this type of connection. But our friendships, it's a different kind of intimacy. It's an intimacy that is fundamentally a part of our identity. Because what happens if that romantic relationship ends? We need our friendships and our girlfriends specifically to help us remember exactly who we are, to help us remember and reclaim our inherent value without connection to a male counterpart. And to see so many friendships go up in flames over it, to see how we're willing to risk it all for the man. We gotta do better. I hate that for us. Because amongst male culture, men they're gonna stick beside each other before they ever let a woman come in and divide them. And I love that for them, as they should, because men value and prioritize their own identity. Their identity is separate from a woman over anything, over their connection with a woman. But it's something that I really wish that we would adopt and we would prioritize. But aside from men, competition almost always comes from a form of comparison. That is literally the root of it. And that the root of that comparison, the reason why that comparison is happening is because of an insecurity within one or both people. Okay, so then now let's move on to what ends up happening. The role that you're likely, you might be playing into it, probably are playing into it. Don't hate me. And what we can do about it. Here's my thing. We see men compete in friendships within their friendship all the time. Men, I have seen men admit that their friend has more money than they do and express the contempt or the envy or the jealousy that they have toward that, or they know that one friend is more of the ladies man. The women gravitate to him, and it's like, man, how you do that? But they utilize him so that while they're able to be open and honest about the ways that they compare themselves to each other, they're able to just accept it. And that's why they're able to do that, because there is no shame around this comparison that is happening for them. There is no shame about it. And so therefore they're able to openly talk about it. The difference between the way men tend to compete with each other within friendship and women tend to compete with each other within friendship is that their version of competition is friendly simply because it's out in the open. And I think that is what separates friendly competition from this maladaptive form of competition. And with women, with the way that we have been socialized to always be the good girl, to always be the one that is ladylike, to always to be the one that is worthy of being chosen, because that plays a large role, to be the one that is worthy of being chosen. This darn bell. I'm just going to let it pass because I don't like to be interrupted. Are you done? Okay, cool. It is in our best interest, so we've learned and we've adapted to not always show the parts of us that are ugly or not acceptable or bad or can be judged or shamed. And so that means any part of us that varies from being confident, all the time. Any part of us that varies from being pretty all the time, being ladylike all the time. We shove that down. And so the thing is, as much as we talk about the male ego, us ladies, we have a lot of ego, for sure. And the way that shows up in these friendships is that when we find ourselves in a position where we see our friends with something that we want, it is so human to feel jealous. It is so human to feel envious, because these are feelings. And the power that we have as humans is that we don't always have to act on our feelings. We don't have to behave the way that our feelings would have us behave. I really want us to normalize jealousy, envy, insecurity, all of these things, because they are feelings. And the more we try to distance ourselves from that truth, the more that we are, one, self-abandoning, betraying ourselves, and shaming ourselves. And whatever you shame, you're going to continue to stuff down and you can't bring it to light. So therefore you can't be open about it. Therefore it cannot be friendly. It cannot be a friendly atmosphere of competition. Now, sometimes there's just no space for the competition at all. Sometimes, there's no way to make this thing friendly. You just literally have to sit, do some shadow work, deal with it, reconcile it, resolve it within yourself. But other times, because of something that I saw when I was a kid, and I saw this girl being called out about being jealous, and she was denying it so hard, I was embarrassed for her. And I made up my mind in that moment that whenever I felt jealous, thank God, that whenever I felt jealous, I was just going to say it. Because I was so embarrassed. I was like, I don't want to be in that position. Because it was so obvious to everybody else that this girl was jealous. Like, we knew that she was jealous. And she was not copping to it, and that's what made it look even worse. That's what made her situation so much worse. So from there, I was like, I'm just going to admit when I'm jealous, because I don't want to be like that. I don't want to look like that. So it has been a personal rule of mine to always express to my friends. My friend got a new car. It's a beautiful car. I'm like, girl, I'm so jealous. Now, that's a very light situation, because I live in New York. I live in Brooklyn. I have no desire to drive, so I don't really want a car, but I do want a car at some point. But Just the fact that it's so beautiful and new and shiny, I'm jealous. Or even if you've been trying to get pregnant and your friend is pregnant, it is okay to feel, I'm the one saying, I'm going to give you permission. It is okay to feel jealous. That is normal. It is what you do with that jealousy that determines everything. But do not shame yourself, because what jealousy is informing you of is, this is something that I want. And you do not have to hide it. And we go out of our way as women to hide how we actually feel, what we're actually thinking, what our fears are. We're afraid to be vulnerable with our friends. And I get it. Guys are able to do it because their relationships are more superficial. They don't really get into the nitty gritty of things, right? But we do, right? We do. But what I'm trying to tell you is, because we do, that is why it's even more important that we communicate. Because one thing we love to say is that we value communication, right? But do we really value communication, or do we only value communication with men? So if we value that communication, communicate with your friend. Let your friend know, girl, I'm jealous. That's all it takes. I'm jealous. And I'm telling you, you will be surprised that as you allow yourself to admit that to yourself, and as you allow yourself to actually say that, that feeling dissipates. You're literally no longer jealous at that point, because it's out in the open. It cannot hide in order to fester and become a maladaptive behavior that will affect and impact your friend and your friendship. So which is more important to you, your pride or your friendship? Be authentic. Try it. Because what happens is, I think the irony, a lot of us in these situations, we become the men that we complain about. We become the ones that's avoidant all of a sudden. We feel this way and we don't really want to talk about it. We don't want to cop to that. And I understand. But it's the work that is necessary to sustain. And I've heard enough women, me myself, have complained about being in a relationship with men who do not want to do the work necessary to maintain and sustain this relationship. The same is true of us. The same requirement is there for us within our friendships. Are you willing to do the work necessary? Not the work that you want to do, not the work that's actually easy for you to do, but the work that is necessary in order to maintain and sustain this relationship that you claim is important to you. Just say it, just cop to it, just admit it. So here's a little trick that our ego does to make us feel blameless and like we're the victims of these jealous, insecure women who just do too much, and they want too much, and all the women are women are too catty, and that's why we can't be friends. And I get that because I was there. I've said that before. For me, I've had a few friendships that have ended in a space and time. Before they ended, I could definitely sense a competitive dynamic. And what my ego convinced me of was that I was not a contributor to this dynamic. I was not responsible for this dynamic, because as far as I was concerned, I sensed the jealousy coming from them first. I sensed the competitiveness coming from them first. So because my form of being competitive was defensive, I felt blameless. So it would look like this. Somewhere there would maybe be a few things, small things that accumulated, that kind of showed itself that this is smelling real competitive like. Or maybe there was something that happened and it revealed that, okay, there's some competition here. Then what I would do is go into a mode of, okay, you want to compete with me? I'm going to show you, you cannot compete with me. Like, the thing is, I'm not trying to compete with you. I don't care enough. but you cannot compete with me. That would be my position. That's called being on the defensive end of competition. So in that moment, that's when I also became competitive. Just felt a little bit more justified and righteous behind it. I feel like a lot of the women who complain about competition amongst friendships, I suspect we usually come more so from that end of the spectrum. Like, I don't even think about my friends in this way, because that's genuinely how I feel. I do not seek, or it doesn't naturally cross my mind to compete with my friends. I'm such a lover girl, and I love a girl through and through. Not only in my romantic relationships, but in my friendships. And I just want things to be good. Because of that, it was hard for me to recognize the role that I was playing and the way that I was contributing to it. And so here's the thing. After it happened so often, I really had to stop, because I went through a big friend breakup. Like, me and this friend were friends for over 10 years. And we had shared so much experiences and so much intimacy within that friendship that it hurt. It really hurt when that friendship was over, that it sat me down. And I really had to think, like, okay, why am I here again? What is up? So here's the thing, and this is what I want you to pay attention to if you come from that end of the spectrum. I've covered the jealousy and the jealous friend end of the spectrum. Jealous friend, you all right by me. It's okay. I get it. Now, defensive friend, let's talk. What I realized was that for me, now this is going to sound a little bit crazy, but I had to do some serious shadow work around that type of dynamic. And when we hear the word shadow work, we think about negative traits. Okay? Shadow work refers to anything that we push down about ourselves, anything that we have shame tied to. And sometimes that can be good qualities about ourselves. For some reason, we internalized a narrative of shame around these good qualities. And I was a woman that was above being competitive with my friends, above competing with other women. I don't do that. Like, I don't have time for that. You know what that communicated, actually? I wasn't above it. I was selling myself short. Because as I just described, I was definitely competing, just from a defensive end. So in my mind, I wasn't competing. You get it? But what the shadow work showed me was that I had stuffed the version of me that is actually competitive. She's going to run the show anyways. She's going to run the show especially because I don't want to see her. I don't want to view myself as a woman that is competitive with other women. I did not want to see myself that way. And so because I didn't want to see myself that way, the part of me that actually is competitive, I stuffed down. I divorced. But I'm a human. And we're all just alike. Maybe not just alike, but we're all alike. We're the same. So therefore, because I'm human, I do have competitiveness. I am competitive. And this thing kept showing up. If you, again, here at House of Transformation, transformation is an internal experience. Therefore, it's spiritual. Okay? And a spiritual truth is that your experience, everything that you experience externally is a reflection of what's going on internally. And sometimes we think that means it's a direct reflection. Like, just because I perceive this person to be a jealous person, and that means that I'm a jealous person. It doesn't necessarily work that way. However, there is a part of you that you are ignoring. That's why when people who trigger us, they only trigger us because there's a part of ourselves that is connecting to them in some way, good, in some form, good or bad. And so as I did my shadow work around that, I recognized why this pattern kept showing up for me is because I was in denial about, and I kept denying the aspect of myself. I was not accepting myself fully, the part of myself that actually was competitive. So it was being reflected back to me in my relationships, because it's like, can you see me? Are you gonna see me now? Are you gonna admit it now? Can you admit it now? Can you accept this now? Because you're not moving beyond this. The same thing is happening. It's a pattern. So there is some part that you are playing in this. Wake up. You are competitive. Like this, that's the fact of the matter. You are competitive, and you are not owning that. Instead, because I wasn't owning that, you know what that also meant? That I was not being competitive in the ways that were actually where my competitiveness could actually serve me. So that means I was also holding myself back from doing certain things, accomplishing certain things, where I would need to make friends with that competitive edge that I have, that I was denying. So until I was able to accept that about myself, there was no way I could move beyond that pattern of just getting stuck in this dynamic and recreating this dynamic of you get jealous, you start comparing, now you're competing, and so now I'm about to show you why you can't compete with me. That's not how I wanted to do friendship. I learned how to navigate that. Once I was able to see that and accept that, then I was able to heal that part of me that wanted to divorce that human aspect of myself so badly. And that's what I'm hoping a lot of you can do. It's because you view it, you shame it so much in others, and you view it as wrong so much. You make it so wrong. You make other people so wrong to be this way that you cannot accept this thing about yourself, because then you would be just as wrong as you judge those people to be. And who wants to do that? Who wants to make ourselves that wrong? Who wants to feel that wrong? We don't even like feeling wrong in the first place. That's why it's called accountability, and it takes accountability. Okay? But it's okay, because it's just a feeling. And once we learn how to deal with these feelings, then we're able to recreate a different dynamic. So, moving on. Once you own that part of yourself, once you own the truth of who you are, and you free yourself from being ashamed of it, and you free yourself from being ashamed of it by recognizing that it's human. Everybody experiences this. I don't care what they tell you. I don't care what you're telling yourself. Everybody experiences this. So you are not a villain. You are not the monster because you feel this way. And the jealous friend. And you are not a monster if you can identify, or if you learn to accept that you do have a competitive edge, that you can be competitive. That does not make you a monster. That makes you human. You need to be competitive sometimes. Okay? And once you accept that, then you now have power. Now you have power. Because you're not holding yourself back anymore. So with that power, here's what you do. If you are coming from the jealous end of the spectrum, I spoke on it a little bit earlier. You speak it out loud. You say it. The reason why it feels so shitty, so bad, is because you don't want it to be known. You don't want your friend to know that you admire her in this way, or that you have this insecurity and she embodies what you're insecure about. You don't want her to know that you like her style and you feel like her style is better than yours and you would love some tips. So instead, you keep it to yourself. And what you do is you start studying the way that she dresses. Now you're trying to outdo that. That's just not the way. It's not the way to do it. It's not the way to do it. Say it out loud. Accept it for yourself first. Then say it out loud. And it doesn't have to, find a way that you say it. It doesn't have to be, I'm so jealous. To me, that's just, I'm a very direct communicator. I love direct communication. I just feel like there's no way to misunderstand, misread anything if it's communicated directly. So for me, what feels true to me is, girl, I'm so jealous. And in that very moment, I ain't jealous no more. It happened just that fast. Okay? But admit to yourself that you're jealous and then see what comes up for you. See how it sits with you, how you would like to express it. Because maybe it's not, I'm so jealous, but maybe it's, I really like that. Can you help me figure out my style? Have the humility to admit that you feel like her style is better than you. Her style is something you wish that you were able to have the refined eye that she has. How connective is that? To be able to communicate that to your friend, that girl, you have a great sense of style, and I would love it if you could help me with mine. What is she gonna say? Besides, of course, unless she a hater, and she don't want you to have no style. That's a different topic. I'm talking about the friendships that y'all are really friends, or y'all were really friends, and there was or is a lot of love there. But yet shit is just weird and you don't really know how to navigate it. Nobody really knows how to navigate it. I hope that this can be a helpful guide. Admit it, accept it to yourself. Remove the shame. Stop shaming yourself for being a human being. Bring it to the light. Don't keep it in the shadow. Then, now if you're coming from the defensive end, what can be helpful is to admit to yourself that, okay, you've noticed your friend is moving in this way. There's some comparison happening. Remove the shame. Don't shame your friend. Try your hardest not to judge her. Actually, it helps to be able to admit to yourself that sometimes you feel jealous. Sometimes you feel competitive. Because then it brings it from you being here and her being here to y'all being here. It makes it just like this. Y'all can't talk from here, but y'all can talk. And y'all can work things out from here. So accept that this is what's happening. Try to see where and how you can relate and what you can understand. Honestly, empathize. Put yourself in their shoes. Then you can have an honest conversation about it. But this honest conversation has to be a vulnerable conversation. And the reason why I'm stressing that is because it is not a vulnerable conversation to say, I feel like, I don't know, I've been getting some weird vibes from you lately. I just feel like, I don't know, I just feel like you've been comparing yourself to me. And it's been causing a lot of friction. And I just want to move past this. And I want to say, the intention is good. The delivery is setting y'all up to talk about something that is not what you was even trying to talk about. Because now they have to defend themselves. They have to defend and convince you that they are not comparing themselves to you. That they are not doing what you're accusing them of doing. You know that you are communicating vulnerably when you are the focus, when how you feel, how things are impacting you, what's going on for you is the focus of the conversation. If the focus of the conversation is this other person and their actions, that is not a vulnerable conversation. You have now made that conversation about them. Hear me and hear me well. I am not saying that if you position the conversation in a vulnerable way, that will guarantee you a certain response. That is not what I mean. However, if you position the conversation in a vulnerable and come from a vulnerable perspective, what I am saying is you have the best chance at salvaging and creating connection and reconciliation than if you were to approach that conversation and make it about them. So that looks like saying, hey, The other day when we were talking, you said something and I noticed it, and I was, it really hurt my feelings. I felt sad because I felt really misunderstood. So I wanted to know if we could talk about that. I wanted to understand more where you were coming from when you said that. You hear what I'm saying? So I want to understand. There's no accusation. It's just, this is how I felt. This is how I interpreted it. Now, some people are going to be, if they're a defensive person or someone who is highly defensive and is sensitive to feeling wrong, or feel like have this like sensitivity to a sense of failure or something like that, that's not your work. That's not your work, baby. That's not your work. You can't do nothing about that. You can only do what you can do. And I'm letting you know this is what you can do. Letting it be known, here's where I am. Can you let me know where you are? See how that feels? We can't just save our femininity for men. Women deserve our femininity too. We deserve our femininity. If you are, worst case scenario, if you are dealing with someone who is a highly defensive person, who is a person that cannot hold space for you and how you feel, a person who is showing you that they have no interest in doing their part, showing up, meeting you at the bridge, then this is where the evolution comes in. And this is where you have to be. Listen, what I'm suggesting ain't for everybody. You can really only walk this path if you are authentic, if you are ready to put your big girl panties on, and if you value growth. It's like what I said, remember, evolution and growth and all these things sound good, but it don't always feel good. And sometimes it does boil down to the reality that this is not a connection that can continue no matter how long it's been. Because one or both of you are unable or unwilling to show up at the bridge for whatever reason. That relationship may need some space. You may need to cut ties with this person. That part will be up to you to decide what that space looks like, what kind of boundaries you're going to be creating. Let's put the same effort. Let's give the same kind of grace, the same kind of consideration to our friendships as we do our romantic relationships. That is what I believe it means to take two to tango. It is because there is a contribution that both people are making to the dynamic. Not necessarily the behavior or the behaviors. One person, only the person who's committing the behavior can commit the behavior. But the dynamic that is set up, the way we respond to each other, is completely up to both individuals. So I hope that this was helpful. I would love to know your thoughts. And if you come from the more jealous end, who would be brave enough to admit that they come from the more jealous end or they come from the more defensive end? Are you creating the comparison or are you feeding into the comparison? Until next time, keep transforming. Bye.